think 19-year-olds that write biographies shouldn't be writing biographies. So sometimes I feel like that, like, you know, we're so at the beginning of what I feel the Lord's really shown us, and we still have so far to go and so much to learn. But I was 19, I went into full-time ministry. Really, I just wanted to preach. In fact, I just wanted to preach. And, I felt called to, you know, which I had nothing to say at all, but at 19, I sure felt like I did. And I wanted to be an itinerant. I had read a Billy Graham biography, a couple guys had come through, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. I was 19, I interned at the church. Then they wanted to hire me as a youth pastor. I told them no. I said, I kid you not. I said, so this was in 1997. I said, I don't feel called to young people, and I don't feel called to the local church. I just want to preach. And I said no. And then some doors got closed, so I said yes to youth pastoring. And I'm not exaggerating. I said yes because, not even because I felt called to youth or to the church, but because it felt fun to be in charge. So I said, yeah, that sounds good. I'm 21 by then, and just have no clue at all, at all. That it's not really fun to be in charge, but so I said yes, and then that started a real journey. One of the things that's intriguing to me, and we talked about this last night, is you really have to begin to get sober about this issue. It is not impressive people to start races. It is impressive people that finish races. Right. The issue is not, can you be excited? And part of our issue, I think, especially in young adult circles, is that we get very excited about things, but rarely strategic about things. Yeah. And we tell the story of my son, he's quite possibly the most competitive person I've ever met. Seriously, everything is a competition, and everything. In fact, his teachers, the one thing they say when we sit down for a parent-teacher, they say he's a great kid, he's smart, but he tries to get everything done first. Like, he wants to be the first one done in every test. So he just flies, so he doesn't even know if he's getting the answers right, but it doesn't matter. I picked him up from school the other day. I said, hey, how was your math test? And he says, I was the first one done. I said, how'd you do? Did you get the answers right? He goes, I don't know, I was the first one done. Like, that's all that matters to him. He wants to win everything. It's a competition point. So about 2 years ago, I had found a Yahtzee in our drawers at our house. I'm like, I'm going to teach my kids Yahtzee. So I really, for like 2 weeks, I got them around at dinner or whatever else. I'm like, kids, I'm going to teach you Yahtzee. And you got to be strategic and lay all this stuff out. So my son's 6, and I'm trying to teach him all this stuff. And then I tell him about Yahtzee, which is like the home run, grand slam, the big boy. And so that's all he hears. He's like, uh-huh. And so every time it would be his turn, I'm like, son, what are you rolling for? He's like, Yahtzee. I'm like, all right, son. He's like, Yahtzee. So he'd roll it, he wouldn't get it. Next time around, so you have to fill that in, right? That you played Yahtzee. Hands like, okay. Did Yahtzee make it down here? So he'd come around again. I'm like, so what are you doing? He's like, Yahtzee. I'm like, son, you just did Yahtzee. Like, you already used Yahtzee. You can't. He's like, Yahtzee. I'm like, all right, we roll it, wouldn't get it, go back around to him. So what are you doing? Yahtzee. I'm like, son, listen, there's a whole strategy to the game. You've got to lay this thing out. You listen to me? I said, all right, now what do you want to roll? Yahtzee. Every time. Every single time it's Yahtzee. That's it. He loses every time. And this is what I feel sometimes when we get around either the revival culture or some of the young adult culture. I love the passion. I love the zeal. But many times I feel like we run around yelling revival, but don't really have any strategy involved in this thing. Or we start really yelling, our destiny and the call of God in our life, and we just keep yelling these things out with no real strategy attached to them. And you have to set your life up for long term. You have to think long term. You have to think long term. And you have to be strategic with your life. What will separate you from the people around you or other leaders is not the next 6 months. It is the next 20 years. Amen. It is how you navigate the next 20 years. This is what separates people. And college ministry is tough because you're only there for 4 years. So it's very like, I got to have now. I got to think, it's now. It's very now because I'm done. And there's a timeline coming and this thing's going to be over. And so we tend to set our lives up, not building for the long term, but building for the short term. And the Bible has not called us to bear short-term fruit. Jesus has called us to bear long-term fruit. It is long-term fruit. Fruit that remains. Fruit that lasts. Yeah. And I tell you, people that set their life up for long-term fruit build differently than people that set their life up for short-term fruit. You build differently when you're going after long-term fruit. And you're saying it's 40 years. That's what I'm looking for. I want this thing to be bearing fruit in 40 years, not just in 6 months. And again, it's the tension on college campuses is tough because it does feel kind of like this is going to be over pretty quickly. This thing better blow up, or I'm going to be going off. And but you have to build long term. You have to think long term. It's not just about getting excited. It's not just about yelling Yahtzee. It's about like there has to be a strategy attached to my life. And I have to think long-term. I want long-term fruit. I don't want short-term fruit. And what's going to separate me is going to be the next 15 or 20 years. How well do I navigate that? And part of the issue is it's at this age right here that you begin to really encounter the word of the Lord for your life. And this is what happened. This is what happened to me. It was my early 20s that God really began to download what he was going to do with me, my call, what I was going to give everything for. I mean, really profoundly. In meetings, I'd be getting called out like crazy. Dreams in the night. All this stuff came alive to me. And what I didn't realize was he was showing me something because he was about to start a process in my life where he was going to grow me. This is what I wasn't fully aware of. To be honest with you, it's super annoying. I almost started telling the Lord, like, listen, if you're going to, because the Lord shows up and he reveals something to you. What was your name again? Because Lauren. This is true. The Lord will reveal something to Lauren, and then and we feel ready, and we feel anointed, and we feel all, and then he's like, now I'm going to take you on a journey for the next 20 years to prepare you for what I just spoke to you. And that's annoying. I just want to get before the Lord and say, listen, if you're going to tell me something, do it like 2 days before. you're like, here's what I'm going to speak to you. Now you got 20 years to go on this journey. And because this is David, this is Joseph, this is Moses. He doesn't really step into his call till he's 80. We know at least by the time he was 40, he was feeling some mandate to free Israel, because that's why he stood up and killed that Egyptian. He was feeling some call in his life. 40 years later is when he was finally ready to step into that thing. Joseph was having dreams about leading, but he doesn't step into leadership the next day. It's years later. David was anointed king. Like he was literally the prophet. Came, separated all of his brothers out, found him, anointed him with oil, and then he goes back to the field. And then he goes on a journey. And this is what will separate you, is that David wasn't prepared in the castle. He was prepared in the field, all by himself, in a room, worship, prayer, getting things alive in his heart. He was prepared serving. That's why we talked about last night, this process of serving. David had to learn how to serve. And he didn't serve a good leader. He served a bad leader. He served a leader that wanted to kill him. He had to learn how to serve. And he was in a cave. The Lord stuck him in a cave with a whole bunch of messed up people. I was like, now learn community. Figure out how to do life with these guys. Because all of that was the preparation for him to step into the anointing he had, which was to lead in the castle. He was anointed, but he wasn't prepared. And this is what throws people off. I feel anointed because I am anointed. The Lord showed up and put oil on my life. It does not mean that he's sticking me in that call right now. It means he's now taking me on a journey to prepare me. And what I found is this. It is the grace of God. The reason I'm telling you this is because I need you to understand the next 20 years are really important. And we're talking about campus ministry right now, but you can't just think short term. What if the Lord's calling you to be the seed that dies for the next 4 years on that campus so that growth can happen?
Man.
What if that's it? What if he says, I want you to lay your life down. I want you to be the seed that falls to the ground, because if it doesn't fall, if somebody doesn't die as a seed on that campus, there can be no growth. Who knows? And I want immediate stuff, guys. I want outpouring Holy Spirit. I want this stuff. I'm not talking about when we sit around. And you got to be active now. Like we don't, but the Lord takes your life. Ian Bound says that the Lord develops his men and women in secret. Your life is developed in that inner room, in that serving, in that cave. He develops your life in secret. What I found was that it's the grace of God. Because when the Lord shows up, he gives you a word this big, but you're only this big. And if he was to release this on this, this kills this. And so he gives you a word, and then he says, but you're only this big, but I'm going to take you on a journey now where I'm going to grow you until you're the size of what I said. And what I found was that what got me through that journey, I'm still on the journey, but what got me through this process was that I had the word of the Lord. I knew what he told me. Like those seasons where the Lord spoke to me so clearly is when stretching comes. And make no mistake about it. If you want to be a leader, leadership is a life lived in over your head all the time. Stretched beyond your capacities. It's just the life of a leader. And so through those times of the Lord stretching me, in fact, if I meet anybody that's not being stretched, it concerns me because I'm like, if you're not being stretched, you're not growing. Like it's the whole process. Like I have kids, their bodies are being stretched right now because they're growing. And so the reason I